Hello, this is Del Ballou again with another mixed media art tutorial. I learned a few years ago that some pastel artists do watercolor paintings underneath their pastels, and when I discovered this, I decided to go back and pull out some of my watercolor paintings that were just stuffed away in a drawer or in the garage. I brought them out and gave them new life, changed them to a mixed media painting. So today I'm going to be doing that with this watercolor painting. This painting is not too objectionable as a watercolor painting, but it really isn't quite finished to my satisfaction. So I decided to use it for this demonstration. If you haven't worked with pastels before, they are very messy, and because they're messy, they get all over your hands. You also get the other colors all over them. So when you start out, you may have to eliminate some of the old colors, and here is a good example of that. And if you notice on several of the sides, because of where I handled it, and even just being in the box, so you'll want to clean those off, and I clean them off by just using a paper towel, and it's a pretty simple matter. In some cases, you might not care whether you clean them off, because some color blending and some graying down might help. The other thing that you might need to know is the way to sharpen these pastel pencils. When you first take them out of the box, when they're new, they have a nice square edge, or at least mine do, and in order to use them on a fine line, you can either use the corners, but once the corners get or lose their squareness, then you can take fine sandpaper and you can just rub them until you get another square edge or a point. But I don't really like to do that because of the fact that it's a waste of my pastels. The other thing that you can do is use pastel pencils, and I don't have those out right this minute. I will be getting them. I just forgot to bring them to the table today. So I'm going to begin by simply covering up whatever I have in this watercolor painting, staying pretty much true to the color changes. And I'm going to begin actually with a lighter pink color. Cleaned it off a little bit, but I'll start up here with some of the lighter areas, and I just follow the area where I want this to go, and you'll see as time goes on you can blend these just like you blend watercolor or oil or acrylic paint, and you can change your mind. It's always a good thing when you put colors up next to the lighter colors, that you put those up next to darker colors in some areas for contrast. And I think that's especially true with pastels, because they're somewhat dull by their very nature. So that's what I'm doing here, establishing the lighter colors. You can begin anywhere you want to, of course, especially since it's your painting, but I do it different ways at different times. But in order to make sure that my lighter pink areas stay pink, I thought this time I would change up and do the light areas. And so far this is working for me. It's important to put pressure, especially if you happen to be working on a white surface, because pastels just do not cover white very well, which is a good reason to do pastels over watercolors. A lot of pastel artists use tinted papers because of that very thing. In the case of this particular painting, I'm trying to salvage a watercolor, so naturally the watercolor is already here for me, and I've already established my color palette. But I use pastels exactly like I use other medium, in blending colors, looking for highlights and shadows, more specifically looking for shapes of highlights and shadows. I guess if I have a complaint at all about pastels, it would be that they're so dull, which makes it, I think, more important to do your contrasting colors so that the colors pop. Now, what shall I use for my next color? Okay, this is going to be my medium value. I don't know if you can tell on the video, but my different colors have different shapes. That's because shadows and highlights have shapes. And as I say often in my video tutorials and in my classes, if you'll try hard not to be painting a flower or a tree, but if you rather paint the highlights and the shadow shapes, what you'll find when you're finished is that you have been able to indicate what that tree looks like in reality just by following the shapes. And if you've read Betty Edwards' book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, you already have some concept of why that particular method of painting and drawing works so well. Is because your right brain will follow shapes, even negative shapes, negative spaces. But your left brain looks at that flower and says, that's a flower. Flowers have petals, flowers have stems and stamen and leaves and all of that sort of thing. So your left brain starts to dictate you what it thinks a flower ought to look like. And in most cases, it just doesn't always work. And it certainly can be frustrating for the beginning painter. Okay, I'm liking the way this is looking so far. I'm going to get my pastel pencils here in a little while, and that sometimes helps me to blend, because I can get a point, because you can actually use a pencil sharpener with the pastel pencils. And this technique actually works pretty fast. You see, I'm using the corner of this piece to get into closer spaces. If you haven't ever had any experience, don't have any knowledge of pastel paintings, you can go online and look up Mary Cassatt and Edward Degas. They're famous pastel painters. I think pastels are really like everything else, especially in art. It's kind of different strokes for different folks, as we say. And I'm always a little bit interested when my friends on Facebook comment about paintings. I seem to get more comments and more likes on certain things than I do others. I don't typically want to paint things just because they're more popular to other people. I think art is a very personal thing, and the activity of painting is a very spiritual thing. And so if you're just doing it to make money, and of course that's when you have to consider what pleases the buying public, then you're apt to have more of a, shall I say, carnal response to your own work. I write books, and I write them because I just have to. And it would be wonderful to make a lot of money, and I guess a lot of people do consider that if they're writing books. But for me, it's, first of all, it's important for me to have a venue where I can express myself, and my books in particular, because most of them are inspirational. It's important for me to be sharing what it is I believe and what I think. And my paintings are the same way. Like I said, I'd love to make a lot of money doing what I love, but it's more important that I love what I do. And that's actually a pretty insightful comment now that I think about it. I'll have to write that down someday. Now I do have some shadow areas down here that I will need the purple for later, but for now I want to finish this flower. And I'm going to get my pencils because I need to do some details.